Good evening, all. Good evening, all. Can we just do a bit of house cleaning before we do get started? If you do have your cell, can we please put them on vibrate or on the silent position right now? There will be a few ground rules as we do go through this forum this evening. We ask that anyone participating from the audience, as you come to the mic to pose your question, please have it in a question form, no statements, and also with courtesy being displayed to whomever you're making the question to. We did receive a few emails that we may have a chance to read those questions as well. And I think without any further ado, let me say good evening to all of you again, and thank you very much for attending this public forum on term limits and work permits. Let me say for the record, first off, my name is Louis Sumner. I'll be the moderator this evening. And let me just state for the record, this is not a politically motivated nor motivated by the union. This forum tonight is a group of concerned citizens behind this endeavor. We're all aware that this has been a hot topic for the country for the past several weeks, and we're hoping that with this type of function here this evening that we can help to pose some ideas to those in charge, whether it be the government or the opposition. I'd like to, at this time, just give you our list of panelists. They are the minister, the senator, the Honorable Michael Fahey, who is the Minister of Home Affairs. We also had the Shadow Minister of Home Affairs, the Honorable JPMP Walter Robban. We have also the President of the Employees Council, Mr. Keith Jensen, the President of the Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Ronnie Vera, a patent contractor, Brother Michael Ross, and the President of the BIU, Brother Chris Ferber. And the format as we continue on is going to be that I'm going to go and read their bios, starting with the Minister and Shadow Minister. After that time, I'll introduce the others. But when I do introduce each and read their bio, the Minister and Shadow Minister will have 5 to 7 minutes to give us their feeling on this particular topic, and then 3 to 5 minutes for the rest of the panelists. Is everybody okay with that? So without any further ado, Senator the Honorable Michael M. Fahey, JP, the Minister of Home Affairs. Michael Fahey was appointed to the Senate and as the Minister of Home Affairs following the One Bermuda Alliance election win in December 2012. Prior to becoming a minister, he served on the Boundaries Commission and was also a commissioner of the Commission for Unity and Racial Equality. Minister Fahey is a lawyer and notary public and is a member of the Bar of England and Wales and the Bermuda Bar, being called to both in 2001. Without any further ado, Minister, I had to shorten these for the sake of time. I told you guys earlier. I'm going to turn it over to him for his thoughts for about 5 to 7 minutes on this very hot topic.
Thank you very much. Get this mic right. Thank you for having us this evening. Thanks to my fellow panelists, and thank you to the members of the audience. It's a great crowd this evening. The moderator is correct. This obviously has been a very hot topic, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to perhaps explain a little more our views of the government in terms of term limits. I thought it might be useful to give some background into term limits itself, and perhaps some of the reasons why they have now been removed. The original policy for term limits was introduced in 2001, April, and it's actually called the Measures to Inhibit Long-Term Residency. Why do I say that? It's important for me to say that to make the differential between term limits and work permits. There is, I believe, a vast amount of confusion in respect of term limits and work permits. The two are different and distinct. At the time that the term limit policy was introduced, there were about 8,000 non-Bermudians in the workplace, and that's about what we have now. And there were about 4,000 dependents of those work permit holders. There was a trend that suggested that 1/8 of the original entrants were still in Bermuda after about 15 years. There was obviously a very big concern at that time that there would be a legitimate expectation of residency for those persons who had been here for a long period of time. And those of you may remember there was a green paper and an awful lot of debate at the time about how to fix that issue. Of course, Bermuda is a very small place, and we cannot and should not be prepared to continuously grant residency rights, because we are a very small community. In 2002, the then government implemented the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Amendment Act to provide long-term residents who arrived in Bermuda before the 1st of August 1989 access to Bermudian status or permanent residency, as depending on circumstance. There were no measures in place at that time. The act was amended, it's called Section 7A, which made it very clear that the grant of a work permit did not provide for a claim of long-term residency. As a secondary point of that, there was a policy put in place which is now commonly called the term limit policy. It is become apparent that as well at that time there was a waiver that was put in place to say that when you were receiving a work permit that you were waiving your legitimate expectation to have residency. So that was the purpose behind it. It was not at that time to do with work permits. It was to do with the legitimate expectation of residency. One of the things I'm going to address very quickly is, of course, the government has come under some criticism for perceived lack of consultation and a promise that was made by the government to suspend term limits for 2 years pending the review of a better policy. Upon taking office, I'll make this very clear, we spent a significant time in the ministry reviewing the term limit policy. We looked at the Immigration and Protection Act, and we looked at the waiver that was in place, and we sought an updated legal opinion from one that had been obtained in 2006, which essentially suggested that as a result of the amendment to the Act of Section 7A, there was no requirement for a term limit policy to protect legitimate expectation of residency. And that's the key. The term limit policy was seen in terms of an updated legal opinion that it was an unnecessary extra piece as a result of Section 7A that was already amended. And that's very, very clear. We have seen any number of reports, we've seen any number of statistics that demonstrate that term limits was having a detrimental effect on the economy. We did some research on that. It's also very worthy of note that over the period of time of the term limit policy, 35% of work permit holders had that policy waived. They were not bound by the term limit policy. A further 35% from the statistics demonstrate that they were given extensions of time past the 6-year term limit. So we have a situation where up to 70% in total were actually in some way excluded from the 6-year term limits. That suggests in itself that the policy wasn't necessarily working in the way in which it may have been designed. In addition, there's an awful lot of categories that we've seen where automatically extended based on application to the term limit policy. In particular, we had accountants, lawyers, chefs, auto mechanics, and other tradesmen and professionals where the term limit extension was automatically granted. So when you hear these statistics, you understand that perhaps the term limit policy was not required. In November 2010, it was shared with the then Senate that all of the decisions made on 6,817 active work permits would be subject to term limits. And again, that's where we have the statistics that demonstrate 35% had been granted waivers and 35% had been granted extensions. The remainder still had an opportunity to at least apply for an extension to that term limit position. And we can provide lots of stats, but in the interest of time, I won't go through all of those.
Almost there. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. We have now an issue, of course, where there is a pool of individuals who have been here and are remaining here as a result of the individual waivers that have been given. So we do have an issue that needs to be examined. We are going to be putting in place a number of things to protect Bermudians in the workplace, because that's separate and distinct from term limits. We've made a number of pledges in respect of work permits, because I think that's one of the biggest concerns is out there, is that somehow term limits are going to affect the employment of Bermudians. That is simply untrue. The work permit policy is the policy that protects Bermudian jobs. It's dependent upon the Department of Immigration to make sure that Bermudians are given first dibs if they are qualified to have the position that is advertised. There are a number of initiatives that we'll be following, and I can answer some questions later about that. But what we will be doing is implementing some policies and legislation against employers who breach immigration policy. We've heard many stories where employers perhaps submit information looking for work permit that isn't necessarily true and is at the detriment of Bermudian employment. So we'll be looking at that very carefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Minister Fay. Next, on the panelists, again, we're only going to give them 5 to 7 minutes, and questions can be posed to them once we've heard the panelists. Next on our list is the Shadow Minister of Home Affairs, Honorable Walter H. Rabban, JP MP. Mr. Rabban joined the Bermuda Progressive Labor Party in the late 80s as a member of the party's youth wing. He has held various offices within the party, including Secretary General and Deputy Chairman of the Campaign Committee. Mr. Rabban was first elected to Parliament in December 2007 as a member of Parliament for Constituency 15, Pembroke East Central, replacing retiring MP Brother Ottawell Simmons. He was re-elected in December 2011 and again in December 2013 during the period that the PLP was in government. Mr. Rabban served in various ministries, including Minister of Transport until December of 2012. Mr. Rabban presently serves as Shadow Minister of Home Affairs. Along with his careers that have been in law and banking, Mr. Rabban has written numerous articles on history and politics. And Mr. Rabban, you have 5 to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, everyone, for being here, and welcome to the fellow panelists, parliamentary colleagues, brothers and sisters of the Union, of all organizations, and of course members of the public who are here. I'm honored to be here to speak on behalf of the Progressive Labor Party. Certainly the issue of term limits, which were established in 2001, has been the subject of much discussion and debate as around the policy and its impact. I won't dispute any of the facts around the rationale of the policy debated by or presented by the minister, but I will give my own explanation related to that issue. It certainly begins with the issue of long-term residency, which the Progressive Labor Party had to address prior to 2001, and the government at the time went through an extensive process of public consultation, which was specifically to ensure that the unfinished business of the United Bermuda Party government was addressed, and that was the issue of long-term residency. This was an important political social problem and had human rights implications. A green paper, as the minister states, was produced, which devised 2 different concepts. One was the new category of permanent residency, which the permanent residency certificate came out of. Those persons who qualify for that certificate will be allowed to stay in Bermuda, not subject to permit control, recognizing their long-standing presence and connection with Bermuda. These persons, of course, had developed connections of real substance with the community. Some had families and children that were connected with Bermuda, and so their rights needed to be considered. The other piece of that picture was, how do we not make sure that that problem, that issue, happened again? This is where the limiting in the amount of renewals and the removal of the expectation a permanent holder would have to stay here was dealt with. And that was the term limit policy, which was devised to complete a picture which included 2 pieces: the permanent residency question, and how do we not make sure that the permanent residency question arises again. Now, ironically, what we've seen is that the business community, who frankly for a number of years has been the biggest opponents to the policy, have not taken responsibility for it as well. Part of the consultation that the government went through at the time was with them. International business, local business, they were all around the table. So when the policy was devised in 2001 to then be implemented in 2007, it was with their consent. The government did not unilaterally put this policy in place to address those two key components. So that's one of the myths, unfortunately, that have been pushed as if the government, the former government, put this in place on its own with almost no recognition of the interests or rights of others, particularly business. That's untrue. Now, I want to read something to you, if I'm given permission. And it's an article that was made available to me, dated 1962. And I don't dispute the issue of waivers that the minister explained as to how those waivers operated. That's perfectly how it works. But this article, I think, tells something about this issue. And it's an article in the Royal Gazette, April 21st, 1962. Commission named to study the employment situation in the colony. And it says, a thorough examination of jobs for Bermudians is going to be dealt with by a commission of inquiry, of which Mr. John Plowman, later Sir John Plowman, would be the chair. And these were the terms of the commission that they were to examine. The employment situation in Bermuda, with special reference to the importation of non-Bermudians and the availability of Bermudians now and in the future. 2, the facilities now available for the training of Bermudians to determine the training requirements necessary to ensure the fullest possible use is made of Bermudians at all levels of responsibility. This has been a long-standing issue. That's what I read this for you to understand. 50 years ago, people were doing exactly what we're doing because this issue was important then as is important now. And the feelings of the community still remain important and crucial to this issue. So here we are today, continuing another chapter of this long debate. What is different now is that we're discussing the elimination of a policy by the government. Now, the Progressive Labor Party position is clear on this. We've explained it certainly since the announcements of the government. We are against the action taken by the government. It is contrary to the representations that they repeatedly made to the public prior to the election and with pledges made during the election. The commitment to 2-year moratorium with a review. It's also very clear that the actions of the government was not preceded by satisfactory consultation. I have not heard one union yet admit publicly that they were properly consulted. The minister has said that they were consulted, but no one is admitting to that case. In fact, the only information about consultation was an email sent from the ministry with essentially only 3 working days for them to reply to an extremely important change that the minister was to announce. Now, do we feel that that's proper consultation? I don't think most people would agree.
1 minute, Mr. Roban.
The government needs to, we feel, do some things, and they must be done immediately for the public benefit. Explain the exact measures that will be taken to strengthen the work permit process and address the work permit application abuse where it does occur. Which industries and sectors will be targeted by the government, since job growth is their priority, they say. And what will the government be doing to facilitate streams of new economic development in Bermuda that will create jobs for Bermudians, to work opportunities, so that they'll feel confident about their work situation. With the change the government has made, many Bermudians do not now feel confident with their work situation. That's simple. We know that. That's why many of you are here today.
Right.
Further, the government needs to assure Bermudians conclusively, on the basis of tested law, that persons working here for prolonged periods will not acquire any rights of residency. Not sure that that's...
Shadow. About time. Right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Before I move on and introduce our next speaker, can I just ask again that we refrain from this name calling? We're not here to conduct ourselves like that, or call it a group, whichever group, liars or whatever. Please, let's refrain from that. Again, this is about hoping to have some community dialogue and some discussion about this very important topic in our country. And at this time, before I go even further, I'd like to recognize all the parliamentarians that are in the House, that of the government and opposition leader, without having to call each and everyone's name and their title. We certainly acknowledge you, and thank you for coming out. Without any further ado, let me go on to introduce Mr. Keith Jensen, who's the president. Want money first? Okay. They've asked for a little switch here. So, I'd like to now introduce Mr. Ronnie Vera, who's the president of the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce. Ronnie Vera is a seasoned information technology professional with a career spanning over 30 years. He has held IT leadership positions in banking, insurance, and e-commerce industries. In addition to his IT qualification and experience, Mr. Vera is qualified in the field of information systems security, holding 3 of the industry's leading certifications. He has also held leadership positions in several other community and volunteer organizations as well as government boards. Mr. Vera is currently the COO of First Atlantic Commerce Limited, in addition to being president of the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce since May of 2012. Mr. Vera, welcome.